You come home, and the apartment is in complete darkness. The fuse box is ripped out, and the HOA claims you're in debt. But you've paid everything, and they have no idea about the most important thing. You're the new head of the district. What happened next shook the entire neighborhood. But let's start from the beginning. I got home after a 3-week business trip, late evening, dog tired. I pressed the elevator button. Silence. Fine, I think. It's just 1 floor. I'll walk. But the entrance door creaks open like it hasn't been oiled since the last century. I go up, insert the key. The lock feels rusted. I step into the apartment. It's dark. I flick the light switch. Nothing. Try another room. Same silence. No light, no sound. It's cold. Smells damp. Weird. First thought. A breaker tripped. I take off my coat and head to the fuse box in the hallway. Everything's fine. No circuit flipped. Something's off. I head down to the basement, flashlight in hand. Open the breaker panel for my building. And freeze. My breaker's just gone. The cable sticks out like a severed limb. The label with my apartment number. Ripped off. Like I was erased. I'm stunned. No note, no warning. Not even a slip of paper on the door. As if I never lived here. I go back up and call the dispatcher. No answer. Call the HOA. Voicemail. I send emails, messages. Nothing. An hour passes. I'm on the stairs, coat on, flashlight in hand. Then the security guard steps out for a smoke. He sees me and says, "Mr. Holt, you're the new owner, right?" I nod. He hesitates. You see, the HOA probably doesn't know. They're still using the old records. The previous owner apparently had some debts. I stare at him, stunned. I paid everything. In advance, for a year. Personally, with receipts, with stamps. I'm not just a tenant. But to them, I'm no one. Just another name they can cut off. And at that moment, something inside me boiled over. They didn't cut me off by mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I lived in my own apartment like I was camping somewhere in the mountains for 6 months. 6 months without electricity. I charged my phone in the car, my laptop, at cafes. And dinner? I cooked it on a camping stove by the window, hoping the draft would at least carry the fumes out. The place always smelled of soot and candles, like I wasn't in America but in besieged Leningrad. I wrote, I called, I showed up in person, I filed complaints, and the response? Silence. The HOA was silent like the mafia, or like a concrete wall. And then, at one of the meetings, I finally saw him. Gerald Tripp, head of the HOA, face of a petty tyrant, manners of a concentration camp commandant. He loved speeches, yelled at everyone, especially the elderly women if they dared ask where the roof repair money had gone. He sat with his hands on his belly, repeating the same tired lines. You have to pay on time, otherwise you'll be left with nothing. Documents? Where's the stamp? Where's the signature? He said that to everyone, and he said it to me, like I'd come begging, like my receipt was just a piece of toilet paper, and in that moment I realized one thing. This wasn't a mistake. It was the system, a system rotting from the top, and they just had no idea who they were messing with. When it became clear that official channels were dead ends, I started doing things differently. I compiled a folder with printouts of all my payments. Every receipt, every signature, every check, all in chronological order. I began recording conversations with HOA staff. Who said what? Who lied? Who got caught contradicting themselves? Then, conversations with neighbors. At first, people were hesitant. But once one person started talking, the building's floor rep, Mr. Barton, a quiet, dry man with a habit of sipping tea by the entrance, once quietly said, "You're not the first. Gerald, He picks his targets. He terrorizes anyone he doesn't like. If you're not in with him, you're out. No power, no water, no parking. Nothing. I listened and nodded. Didn't say a word in response, just made notes. I started spending more time outside, watching. Broken windows in the stairwells, trash that sat for weeks, untouched. A playground that looked like a scene from a post-war documentary. But the money? The money was there. People were paying. It just vanished. Like into a black hole. That's when I realized this wasn't just corruption. It was a system. An organized racket. And then came the day. The mayor signed the papers, approved a new appointment, mine. I stood there holding the document, staring out the window of my dim apartment, still without power. And I thought, just a little longer. They don't know yet, but they're about to. Only 3 days had passed since my appointment. In that time, I hadn't made a single public statement. No letters, no responses to the HOA's messages. I simply showed up, at their meeting. The room was just as expected. Plastic chairs, a weekly humming AC, a battered projector, and that ever-present smug smell of cheap capsule coffee. I entered calmly, nodded politely to the security guard, walked past Gerald. He didn't even look up, confident as ever. I sat in the front row, dead center, facing the board. So, someone from the committee began. On today's agenda, we have Mr. I stood. No theatrics. Ryan Holt, new head of the district council. The room fell silent. Gerald froze. His fingers stiffened on the table. His gaze twitched slightly, but he tried to keep composure. I waited a beat, pulled out the folder, laid it on the table in front of me, connected my laptop, turned on the projector. On screen, spreadsheets, screenshots, invoices, large and clear, by date, with notes, amounts that didn't add up, signatures that didn't match the originals, lists of residents who'd been cut off by verbal order. I began reading aloud. Calm, precise, unemotional. Apartment 3B, power cut without protocol, no board resolution recorded. Apartment 6C, payment processed March 14th, cut off on March 17th. Stated reason, personal conflict. Murmurs began spreading through the room. People looked at each other. Someone stood up. Whispers turned to noise. One woman asked out loud, "Is this real? Is this what they did to us?" I looked at Gerald. He was no longer sitting. He was clinging to the armrests, trying to say something. But it was too late. The system had failed, and I stood there with the documents, not as a man out for revenge, but as the one who had no choice but to restore order. When the slides ended, a deathly silence fell over the room. Gerald sat frozen, stone-faced. A second passed, then another, and then an explosion. "This is a lie," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "Forged! A setup! Everything we've done is by the book!" His voice rose to a full-blown scream. His hands trembled. "Where did you even get this? This is unacceptable. This is—" But he didn't finish. The door to the room opened. 2 men in dark suits, walking in with quiet authority. One held out a badge. The other spoke, calm and measured, as if they were just stopping by accounting for a routine audit. "Good afternoon. District Financial Oversight. We'd like to review the HOA board's financial records for the past 2 years." Gerald turned pale. He stammered like a cornered animal. We're in the process of reviewing," but his words no longer mattered. In the front row, an elderly woman sobbed softly. It was Mrs. Mary Winslow, the one they cut off in January for non-payment, even though she had a receipt, and a disability. She slowly raised her head, looked at me through tears, and said, "Thank you, Ryan. Thank you." "And me?" I said nothing, just watched as everything they had built, the lies, the fear, the illusion of control, began to unravel. Inside, I was burning. I remembered freezing in the dark, neighbors pushed to the edge, people afraid in their own homes. They tormented this community for years. And the worst part? They almost got away with it. Almost. 3 weeks passed. Gerald was removed from his position. He hasn't been seen since. Not at meetings, not even around the building. External management was brought in, an independent commission, people from the district, no backroom deals, no strings attached, just business, done right. I pushed for a full recalculation of all payments. Every unfair penny was returned. Neighbors received compensation. And most importantly, we ran a clean audit. Official, with a report available online. Now no one can ever lose your payment again, or ask, "Where's the stamp?" The building changed. The elevator worked again, smoothly. No jolts, no skipping floors. The stairwells, clean. No dirty flyers on the walls. The lights came back. Not just in the apartments, in the neighbors' eyes. I saw Mary step out of the elevator with a bouquet of flowers, smiling at someone. Mr. Barton back at his usual spot, sipping tea by the door. Only now, not alone, but chatting with someone. People who had been crushed like bugs. It was like they woke up. For the first time in a long time, they were free. And me? I just opened the door to my apartment, took off my coat, walked into the kitchen, turned on the light. It came on. No flicker, no dim glow. I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, just sat there. No flashlight in hand, no candle, no tension. And for the first time in 6 months, I simply felt at home. The real story began after the meeting. Once the commission got their hands on the documents, the truth came out fast. And as always, it was more mundane than anyone imagined. Gerald had been transferring HOA funds to accounts under his wife's name, officially as donations to the beautification fund. Sounds legitimate, right? Except the fund didn't exist. No office, no website, no charter, just a mailbox and a bank account. And do you know how they caught him? His handwriting. Seriously. This genius had signed every document himself, as the residents, as the board, even as the fund. Same sloppy scribble, the same crooked little G. He practically wrote his own indictment, elegantly in cursive. The neighbors were stunned, especially when the first headlines hit. Newspapers ran bold titles like "Tyranny in Suburbia," "HOA Head Arrested in Embezzlement Scandal," and "From Blackout to Breakthrough, How One Man Exposed a System." Local forums exploded. People shared stories, posted comments. How many years had we endured this? And all it took was one person to turn it all around. And you know what the mayor said when I brought him the full report? He looked at me, smirked slightly, and said, "Ryan, honestly, I didn't think you'd start changing the system. This fast." I didn't reply, just nodded, because this is only the beginning. A lot has changed in our neighborhood since then. We opened a resident center, just a simple space. A few tables, a coffee machine, a bulletin board. But the most important thing, life is happening there now. Anyone can walk in, ask a question, get help. All HOA documents, open, down to the last cent. Every week, a report, every issue. Discussed at the general meeting, transparent, honest, human. Now the HOA no longer has the right to cut off anyone's power or water without a court order. Not a single lever of pressure, not a single backroom deal. And me? I didn't become a hero. I just didn't walk away, didn't shrug it off, didn't say, "It's not my problem." And you know what I realized? Sometimes to bring down an entire rotten system, all it takes is one honest person to say, enough. So if they've cut off your power, if they're telling you nothing can be done, if you feel like it's just you against the world, don't give up. Maybe you are the one who's going to change everything.